Hello, we are Robin and Bill Clark. We're here to talk with our Glen family about our stewardship campaign for this year, which is entitled Together Called. We've been members at Glen for almost 15 years. We have raised 2 children at Glen, and we've developed many close friendships here at Glen. But how has Glen truly made a difference in our lives? How have we witnessed our church acting as a people of God who have been together called?
Our Glen journey began when we moved our membership here because our daughter Alex was a preteen and our son Chaz was barely a teenager. We came here because we knew we needed a strong youth ministry and knew that Glen had long been famous for that. And over the course of the next decade, we saw firsthand what a great place Glen was for young people. During that time, Glen provided such a strong community of support for us and for Chaz and Alex. There's no doubt in our minds what a huge role Glen played in helping us to turn out 2 well-adjusted, compassionate, caring, open-minded, loving, Christ-like children. They are now fine young adults who are thriving in graduate school, looking forward to bright futures in their respective careers, but still supported by so many relationships they have formed here at Glen. Those relationships that continue today are with friends from Glen, with many of the parents of friends from Glen, and long-lasting relationships with several phenomenal youth ministers whom they met here at Glen. We are so thankful to have had Reverend Josh Emerson and Reverend Blair Setner in our lives during that time. And it was always a comfort to know that some Glen parent always had eyes on our children and cared for them as they cared for their own children. While Bill and I will take some credit for how our kids have turned out, there's no doubt in our minds that much of the credit is due the people of Glen, who long have been together called to raise children in the image of God. You, the people of Glen, deserve that credit.
A more recent opportunity for us to witness Glen as a people who have been together called involved my springtime battle with COVID-19. In April of this year, I was sicker than I've ever been in my life. After developing many of those awful symptoms of COVID and finally following Robin's advice, I tested positive for COVID and was immediately hospitalized. It was a scary time for me, for Robin, and for our kids. As I lay in that isolated COVID ICU room at Emory St. Joseph's Hospital, I began to receive text messages and emails and phone calls, all telling me that people here at Glen were praying for my speedy recovery and praying for my family. I received phone calls from our ministers telling me that. Now, I have to admit, I'd never before really been a particularly faithful believer in the power of prayer. I've been in church my entire life, and I've heard about the power of prayer, but it just never seemed to resonate with me until those days and nights that I was in the intensive care unit fighting COVID-19. As I later admitted to Mark Westmoreland, I'd never really seen the power of prayer work, and I'd been more than a bit skeptical about it, but no more. I admit to having had a battlefield conversion. I went into that hospital sick as I could be, but after only a night or 2 of suffering with those symptoms and experiencing sheer terror and abject loneliness, a peace came over me as I began to hear about members and the pastors of this church praying for me. And I heard the Glen Knitting Guild was even putting together a prayer shawl for me. Then, after all of that praying by our fellow Glen members, and after only 4 days in the hospital, I was no longer sick. I was able to come home. After all of those symptoms had gone away, I was able to come home and be well. Now, there's no doubt that the folks at the hospital did their fair share of good work to save me too. But who do you think inspired them to do their good work? It all comes back to you, the members of Glen Memorial, who've been together called. Again, you, the people of Glen, deserve that credit. Just as Christ said in Matthew 25, I was sick and you looked after me.
And the Glen community took care of us in other ways during this uncertain time by making us masks like this one, vegetable soup, homemade vegetable soup, phone calls, text messages, and cards. Even though we were not physically with you, we felt your presence and the presence of Christ, and that meant so much to us. Well, what about the future? What have we as a church been together called to do for all of God's children for the rest of 2020 and throughout 2021? First, keep doing what you do. Continue to be the example of Christian witness you are in our community and everywhere you go. Continue to model the way a person who is truly a follower of Christ behaves. Continue to support the ministers and ministries of Glen through your thoughts, your prayers, and your service, and hopefully we will soon do so again through our presence together. Finally, support the ministers and ministries of Glen through your monetary gifts. We cannot do all the wonderful things that Glen Church does without financially supporting it, as if the very existence of our church depends on it. We urge you to prayerfully recommit your financial gifts to Glen. Thank you for your love and support, and God bless you and keep you.
Thank you.